It wasn't camping, but hiking, and it happened over 2 to 3 months in southern Illinois with my girlfriend, sister, and 2 friends who are dating. We went at night the first time. Seemed like a good idea at the time. The trail was short and within walking distance of my friend's house. So we follow this short trail out to a very secluded pond that almost nobody knows about. We were sitting on the edge of the lake, smoking and enjoying the view, when me and the other guy started to feel like we were being watched, uneasy. And we generally have good instincts when it comes to things like that. We know when to GTFO. But our girlfriends and my sister said we were just being paranoid. Then it got cold. Fast. It was January. But the night we went, it was 60 degrees outside. It dropped to probably 40 degrees in 10 minutes, and there was this weird feeling in the air that was almost tangible. Everyone felt cold inside and out, and there was, for lack of a better word, a vibe of intense hatred around us. At this point, the girls freaked out and we hauled out. All the while, feeling eyes on us. When we got back to the house, the temperature had returned to normal. Fast forward a month. It was a full moon and the perfect time for a night hike. The other couple wouldn't go, so my girlfriend and I went alone. We are sitting on the edge of the pond again, and she's got her head on my shoulder. All of a sudden, I have an overwhelming sense of dread emanating from behind me, like there is a presence there I cannot see, and I couldn't turn around. I was so fucking frightened. I looked down at my girlfriend, and her face is cinched up like how she does when she is afraid. And I'm about to ask her if she feels it too. But as I'm about to speak, I hear a woman's voice in my ear. She says something that I completely understand but cannot say out loud because it is the darkest, most horrible parts of me in a language that I know isn't of this world. I'm staring at my girlfriend's face, hoping it's her, but it wasn't, and it was in the opposite ear. I start trembling and said to my girlfriend, "Remember everything you think and feel in this moment." She asked why, and I told her to just do it and we would discuss it back at the house. After a few minutes, the presence is totally gone, and we start running, walking back. As we are doing so, we both felt watched and both heard branches cracking and odd noises in the woods. We get back, and I asked my girlfriend how she felt when I told her to remember, and she said she felt so sad and cold and alone, like she wanted to die, and like we were being watched. I agreed, but was thankful she hadn't heard the woman talking like I had. So I tried to convince myself we were just paranoid. My girlfriend and I agreed to never go back there again. So fast forward another month or two, and I have a day off and nowhere to go till my girlfriend gets out of class. She has moved out of the house with the couple mentioned earlier, and I have at this point tried to convince myself that we were all just paranoid and there is no way that all this happened, but I just can't. So I, being the curious guy I am, go to the pond alone in the middle of the day. I sit on a different part and have no trouble. So I start walking along the edge toward the spot where everything had occurred, and as I get closer, I hear something following me in the trees. But I can't see it. I sit down and I'm scanning the trees on the opposite bank when I get the feeling again. Temperature drops by 20 degrees, and cold terror fills me. I'm just looking down because I am paralyzed with terror. It was like a dream. I slowly look up just a little bit and saw the reflection of a woman dressed in black rags 6 feet away from me in the pond. But no woman. As I see that god-awful apparition, I hear a blood-curdling scream from the woods behind me and I whip around. When I look back at the pond, the woman was gone. I knew I had to GFO, but that meant going through those horrible woods. I take off running and start hearing breathing, cackling, and footsteps behind me. And as it gets to where I feel as if it is right on top of me, I whip out my knife and turn around, and there is nothing. Nothing but cold malice in the air, and again she speaks to me. Different words this time, but the same language. I took off, jumped in my car, and sped off. I will never go back to that place because the worst thing is the woman I saw is the same woman I have seen since I was in 3rd grade, and I started getting a reoccurring nightmare 3 to 4 times a year. Also a fucked up story. For a little background info, my sister is an atheist and doesn't believe in paranormal things. My girlfriend and the other couple are spiritual, But until this didn't put too much stock in ghosts or other supernatural things, and my beliefs are my own. None of us know how to explain what happened, and all go camping, hiking, exploring all the time. This was not random chance or animal. This was something else. I know not many people will believe me, but there has been zero embellishment to this story. I went hiking in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan 6 years ago. My father gave me a GPS. It was one of those old school ones used for surveying land. The cool thing about it was that it would work anywhere. It didn't matter if I was sailing 20 miles off of the coast of Lake Superior or hiking off trail like I was on that day. It worked. The summer weather had my spirits raised. I hiked about 10 miles into what was basically unexplored forest. That's where I found the shack. It was a survivalist lean-to with a door from a portable toilet. There were 4 signs in the clearing surrounding it. They were made of raw leather, tar, and stripped pine sticks. The word "no" was crudely drawn on each of them. At this point, I am seriously freaked out. Nothing should be back here. No one could live here unless they lived entirely off of the land. Michigan winters are rough. I should have left, but curiosity got the best of me. I decide to open the shack door. It was stupid, but I had to know. As I am approaching it, 2 odd things happen. My leg catches on fire, and a stench more powerful than anything I have ever smelled hits me like a shockwave. I rip my pants off and stomp them out. My GPS randomly caught on fire. I think it may have been a malfunction with the battery. Now I am 10 miles into the middle of nowhere with no clear way to get home. This is when the fear started to creep up on me. I told myself not to panic, because panic is what gets lost hikers killed. The stench is overwhelming. It has to be coming from the shack. I swallow the vomit creeping up my throat and investigate. The shack is filled with the heads of a variety of animals. Luckily, none of them are human. They all appear to be pretty fresh. Dogs, cats, bears, wolf, those are the ones that I remember. That's when the man woke up. He was sleeping in there. He was sleeping with the severed, rotting heads. I backed up slowly. For some reason, he screamed. It sounded like a battle cry. I pivoted on my foot and ran until I could not run anymore. At this point, I was lost in the forest. When I ran, I panicked. I broke the first rule of survival, and now I had to pay the price. I crawled up into a pine tree to gather myself. It was a sturdy old beast. From the top, I could see a river that looked wide enough to be important. This is where I made the decision that saved my life. I could either go left or right. Left would have taken me deeper into the forest. I never would have made it out. Luckily, I chose right. After about 12 hours of hiking, I arrived in a small town. I went to this kind of outdoor education boarding school when I was 14-15 in the Victorian Alps in Australia. We hiked the mountains in that area almost every weekend, usually doing 2 to 3 night hikes, sometimes longer. We had heard from teachers and locals that there were hermits in the mountains who lived in shacks or drifted between the old cattleman huts. We just brushed them off as stupid stories that the teachers tell you to spook you. However, we did this one hike at the tail end of winter that kind of led me to believe there were actual hermits living in the mountains. Basically, we were doing this 4-day hike at the end of winter, so it was super gloomy, foggy, and cold the whole hike. The Victorian Alps are famous for their cattlemen's huts, which are all over the high country. We would hike from hut to hut, but we rarely stayed in them, because it was one of the school's rules. So we were hiking on the second day on this steep ridge, and it was mega foggy and cold. You couldn't see into the valley, only down the sloping edges of the ridge. When you're hiking long distances, you don't really talk the whole way, and since it was miserable, we all just had our heads down, walking straight. Out of the corner of my eye, I thought I saw a black dog about 50 meters down the side of the ridge. It wasn't a dingo, because it was jet black and had a collar on. Looked kind of like a border collie. I had only just registered. It was a dog in my mind when I swear I saw a man walking behind the dog. He looked homeless and was looking up at us. Bear in mind it was really foggy, and this guy was darting in and out of trees. I turned around and told my mate I saw a dude and his dog on the trail below. He was still visible, so I pointed him out, and my mate freaked a little too and told everyone else to look. In the moment of getting my group, 6 guys, to stop hiking and all look, he was gone. Everyone other than myself and my mate who saw him shrugged it off as a day hiker and his dog. We joked it was a hermit, but didn't speak about it much after. We arrived at our campsite, which was the Vallejo Gartner hut. We couldn't stay in the hut, so we set up camp on the flat ground around it. We set up, cooked dinner, and got ready to sleep. I didn't think much about the man and dog I saw earlier, but now it was getting dark. It kind of crept into my mind. There is this awesome toilet at this hut that overlooks the valley below. Honestly, an awesome shitter. It was almost dark and I need a shit, so I headed to the loo. As I was sitting there and looking at the view, I was feeling a little creeped out. I'd why. Now, one thing to note is that these huts are all covered in scribbles and people's names, little sayings, etc. Like literally every square inch is covered in something. So if you never really read anything on the walls if you stay at these huts like every weekend. Though as I reached for the toilet paper, these words literally jumped out at me. Run, run, run. He's coming. Run. I never wiped my ass faster. Combined with what I had seen earlier and my creepy feeling, I just bolted out of the bathroom into my tent. The guy I was tenting with actually was the one who had also seen the dude, so I told him what I saw in the bathroom. We both became pretty paranoid and just sort of laid there for hours not making a sound. Eventually, I went to sleep. Shit really gets weird when the next day we woke up to find huge portions of our food missing. We keep the food in the outside bit of our tents, in our hiking packs, and then inside zipped bags. Half of my group's outside tent flies were undone with the packs open, and food bags were strewn over the ground. We thought it was a wombat originally, but the bags were literally unzipped, and our hiking packs had buckles to open them. My thinking was the dude I saw earlier was a hermit and followed us to our camp and stole our food at night. Honestly, creepiest shit I have ever experienced. I had a group of friends who used to get together and play manhunt in a local park at night. Just a different way of saying a big game of hide-and-seek tag, where 3 people start off, and everyone else goes and hides in the park. As they find and tag people, they become as well, until eventually there is only 1 to 3 people left. Then we start again and play into early morning. Well, one night, I was with my friend and his younger brother. We were heading to the middle of the park, to a hot spot for hiding places. There's a long stairwell that leads up a huge hill to a pavilion and field. We were slowly walking down those stairs, maybe halfway down when we noticed 2 folks way below us. Thinking it was one of our friends, we tell out, "Hey, who's that?" Instead of the normal reaction, which is to call out your name, then sprint away trying to avoid getting tagged, a strange voice responds, "Who the fuck are you?" We at first started sprinting down at them, like we normally would, but then we realized they too were sprinting at us. We don't even hesitate. We turn around and sprint up the stairs as fast as we can, adrenaline kicking it, hair sticking up on the back of my neck. We make it up on top of the hill and pause when I look back and they are right behind us, not more than 10 feet away, which is absurdly fast because of how much distance we had had between us. We lose our shit and start sprinting as fast as possible to the park trail that wraps around the entire park and leads to a road where one of our friends live, and that we use as a meetup spot between games. It's a 2-mile run back from where we are, so we book it, sprinting as if our lives depended on it, occasionally looking back and seeing the 2 people following behind. As we get nearer, our energy is spent, but we push on and make it to the street, looking back, and there is no sign of the 2 strangers. All of our group is back at the house, lounging on the driveway, having decided to prank us that night, and while we were off in the park searching for them, they would meet back at the house until we gave up. We shared our story with them, and some laughed in disbelief. Others wanted to search the park for those 2 randoms, but we never discovered who they were. All I know is that they were incredibly fast and shady as fuck. A few friends and I went on an overnight hike in the Rockies behind our little town a few years back when I was in high school. Our camping site was pretty far up there, and it was getting dark. The spot we were at was nestled in a grove of trees, secluded from the wind and elements, so we decided to stop there for the night. The four of us built a little fire and ate dinner, then just talked for a few hours. Then all of a sudden my friend leaps forward and douses the fire with our emergency water, plunging us into complete darkness. Needless to say, the rest of us were pretty pissed, as there was no reason for him to do this. He quickly shushes us, and we realize he is absolutely terrified. Like so scared, he couldn't even speak or move. The rest of us managed to get a few words out of him, and he tells us to look up on the ridge where Mimimbrita Hilling we should have been camping at. It was pretty far up, so it was kind of hard to see at first, but that sight will haunt me for the rest of my life. There was a fire, a big one, like a bonfire sort of thing. Around the fire were several figures moving in a slow circle. They were humanoid, but not quite, and in they had arms and legs like people, but something just seemed different about them that I can't really explain. Almost like the limbs were too long and skinny or something, but maybe not. Anyway, these figures just moved around the fire in a really slow circle over and over again. My one friend claims he could hear them singing something, but I don't remember anything. Importantly, there was one standing off to the side, a little ways, leaning with his arm on a tree branch above his head. It really creeped us out, but we were able to sleep it off. We figured it was a scout troop having a camp or something. Morning came, and we finished off our hike to the peak, and on our way down we passed the place we saw the figures and decided to check out the camp. It was completely deserted. It was obvious that there had been a fire, and there were footprints everywhere. Inside the fire pit was a small mound of charred animal bones, probably chipmunk, and a pile of 4 or 5 rodent skulls that had been burned. Creepy, right? Then we look over at where the one figure was standing. Blood. Not a lot, but enough to be of concern, or anything but enough to be creepy. Then we see the tree branch he was casually leaning against. It was well over any of our heads, and I'm over 6 foot. That would mean that in order for the figure to lean against it like he was, he would need to be at least 7 feet tall. Needless to say, we got off that mountain very fast, and I have never been up there again. We called the Fish and Wildlife Rangers and told them what we saw. They said it was probably just a bunch of kids messing around and not to worry about it. It might have been just that, and we let our imaginations run wild. But all 4 of us swear to this day we all saw the same thing, and it didn't look like a bunch of kids in the dark. I don't believe in ghosts or the supernatural, but those mountains still scare the shit out of me, and I will never go back there again. Don't believe me if you don't want to, but there is something out there. Ghost or dumb kids, I'm not going near it. I'd like to preface this by saying, I do not believe in ghosts. I was walking through the woods after fishing for the better part of the day. I decided to stay out real late and try and fish up some bullheads from a local watering hole. I was only about 13 and stayed out way later than I normally would. Usually I would take a trail home, but decided to cut through some thicker brush to get to my grandparents' house so I could call my mom. I knew she'd probably be freaking out a bit, even though this happened from time to time. There was an abandoned graveyard on my route. I don't remember what the story was about it, but I knew it was there. I had wandered past it before, never really checked it out. It's all overgrown and wild. I knew that if I followed on the outskirts of the graveyard, I'd hit the road and be home free. The day had been pretty chilly overall for a late spring day, but I swear, in my teenage brain, that it was getting colder. I remember looking at my breath and thinking it was weird how cold it had gotten. It was overall a pretty bright night, near full moon, but in the woods it was hard to see. The graveyard was wide open, no trees, it was well lit. As I was walking up, I noticed that the ground was covered in a thin layer of fog, and remember looking into the graveyard and not really registering what I saw at first. It was a person, which at first didn't seem odd, so I kept quiet and walked into the woods a bit more so I didn't get spotted. I didn't know who it was, so I wanted to keep clear. I stepped behind some trees and lost sight of them for a moment, and when I came back around the tree, they were gone. Weird, because I was behind the tree for maybe a few seconds tops. I didn't hear anything either. I walked a bit further, keeping an eye out. I was a bit creeped out. Near the graveyard was a rundown barn? I'm not really sure, but as I got closer to it, I could see that someone was inside. I got a good look, and it was a woman, probably in her 50s. The way the moonlight hit her made her look incredibly pale. She seemed to be digging, but I didn't hear anything. No sounds of a shovel or her making noise in any way. I was maybe 30 feet away. I could see she stopped and disappeared behind some debris. I decided to get the heck out of there and quickly moved to get out to the road. I tried to keep track of her, looking for where she went, but I couldn't find her. It was like she literally disappeared. I kept trucking and came out to the road. The fog was pretty much covering the road. A small country road, fields on one side, woods on the other. As I walked down the road, she would randomly appear behind and in front of me, and I started hiding and basically playing cat and mouse. Each time I saw her, she was hard to see, only in the moonlight, and stuck to the remnants of some of the old houses nearby. She always looked pale, never made any noise. Once I got past that part of the road which had a number of barn foundations and home remnants, I never saw her again, and it instantly started getting warmer. Creeped me the heck out, and I never went that way again. I don't know who or what that was, but I told my uncle about it, and he went and checked it out, thinking maybe someone was trying to excavate the graves. He said there wasn't anything messed with. They thought I was lying. Still gives me the shakes just typing this out. I know it was most likely someone wandering around looking for stuff or checking the place out, but what teenage me remembers didn't seem natural. It was also weird that she never made noise. She also seemed to be able to just appear and move around me. At one point, she was right behind me, and I swear a moment later, she was in front of me. So, I like to hike the small spots and love to drive locally, just checking our back roads. One time, I went through my old town and my old school bus route. Found one of the dirt roads that had a kid's house that was a turnaround point. Thought one day I'd see how far the dirt road went, because sometimes I just like to figure out where shit goes. Well, I saw a conservation area sign with a small parking lot for maybe 2 to 3 cars. GPS overhead showed it was just wooded area, but I wondered how good the trails were, since I love smaller, less crowded spots. Except, just about as quickly as I started the trail, it disappeared. Well, no problem. I've found my way in this scenario before. Maybe there was just too much leaves and I wasn't looking correctly. So I happened to glance ahead through the woods, what looked like an opening in the canopy, with enough light suggesting maybe there's a trail there. And what you know, I saw something bluish slowly moving from left to right. A person. It's gotta be a person in a windbreaker walking their dog or something. I had to be right. It's a desolate area, but the road and houses are still close by. Maybe somebody has a pathway by their house? Except, once I got to where I saw the color, there was still no path and no people and no sound. So I looked rightward, where they would have gone, went maybe 100 yards, and I saw the blue thing up in the damn trees. Now I'm trying to be logical, thinking maybe it's a hunter in a tree stand. But my father is a hunter, and there's no reason be that high up. So I attempted a whistle or two, just so in case it were a hunter, they didn't think I was a deer and shoot. But the kicker is, it also wasn't season. For the first time ever, I'm alone and actually nervous. What am I seeing? I took a few more steps until I decided to just quietly back out. Since there was no path anyway, I didn't want to get more lost. Rarely do I feel uneasy, like I'm being watched. But that was this. I think I've chalked it up to some Mylar balloon from some party that floated through the woods and got caught up in a tree. But given how thick the woods were, man, I don't know. And I hate making up stories that just seem dumb. The normal curious me would have kept going to figure out what I saw, but I've also never brought myself back to life that area. I'm come across some spooky moments, but that just had a whole different vibe. Southwick, MA area, in case anyone else wants to look. I mean, it's a pretty haunted country town anyways, so... I was on vacation in California with my boyfriend at the time. This was about 2008 or so. We went to check into our hotel in Ojai, and it was not ready yet, so we decided to go for a hike. The front desk clerk advised us of some local trailheads and gave us a map. We drove up to one that started at the end of a dead-end hilly street in a suburban neighborhood, but accessed a wilderness area. My boyfriend was carrying our day pack with my cell phone in it, and he had the map in his hands. This was right before smartphones became widespread. As we were standing near the trailhead, a white van approached us, with 2 guys in it. They were dressed like workmen, and the van was an unmarked work van. Not a camping setup, but the kind an electrician or handyman or something would have. One of the men called to my boyfriend and asked if we were going hiking, and was all like, "Oh, I didn't know you could hike here. How long is the trail?" and asks where we got the map, which he seems very interested to see. Immediately my hair stood on end, and I thought it was very odd. There are visitor centers and a ranger station right in town, and the internet exists. Mind you, this is on a dead-end suburban road with nothing but a few houses sprinkled around. So my boyfriend starts being all friendly and volunteering all this dumb information to them. "Oh, we're not from here. We figured we'd check out this trail, blah blah." And all of my internal alarm bells were going off, willing him silently to not approach their van. I felt something was so off, like he was about to get robbed or worse. I tried not to act panicked. I was standing further away, and I started to walk away further, towards the trail, playing the role of the annoyed, impatient girlfriend. As I did so, I looked for escape routes/houses to run to in case they tried something funny. And I thought what an idiot I was to let him carry my cell phone. But I had no pockets. They finally left without incident, and I told my boyfriend, "We are absolutely not hiking here. Get in the car, we are leaving." Those guys were absolutely trying to suss out how long we would be gone for, how familiar we were with the area, etc. At best, they were planning a car break-in. At worst, I don't want to think about it. I am not normally paranoid around other people that I see out and about on and around trails, and I even hike alone sometimes without anything weird or unusual fears, but there was just something so wrong about these guys. I feel like we narrowly avoided trouble that day. My husband and I were just discussing this again, because it's a total what the fuck experience that makes me throw up my hands when I talk about it. But it's led me to all sorts of internet deep dives, periodically. 3 years ago, we hiked the TCT with a friend. One night we were nestled in a super cool spot on Death Canyon's shelf, our backs to a sheer face of rock. A raging thunderstorm came through as we were sleeping, and I've never heard such loud sounds reverberating off of the cliffs. Terrifying, awe-inspiring. Anyways, I'm a light sleeper, so I was awake a lot of the night. It was pouring ice-cold rain that turned to sleet that blanketed our tent and camp. Around 3:30 in the morning, when I was lying there completely awake, I heard what sounded like a woman's voice. It sounded enough in the distance that it wasn't as if she were in our camp, but close enough that I could clearly catch that she was singing a melody. A completely haunting song that sounded like mourning, like an old folk song in another language. I told my husband and friend the next morning it sounded like sad yodeling. Ridiculous, I know, but it was very throaty, beautiful and haunting. Now I wonder, a native song? It was 3:30 in the morning during a raging thunder and sleet storm. If by some chance some poor soul even happened to be hiking past, they would not have been singing. Pounding sleet, rain, and very close together peals of thunder and lightning. But we were so far away from the trail that couldn't be. There were no sites occupied near us. Honestly, it stuck with me. I know I may get roasted, but it was so peculiar, and when it comes up with our buddy or my husband, I just shrug and say, "I swear, I know what I heard." Does anyone have similar experiences while backpacking? Hiked up to a rock outcropping in Acadia, NP a couple years ago to shoot the Milky Way. Everything went fine the whole time I was up there. Good weather, good shots, good fun. Just as I'm waiting for my last round of long exposures to finish, all of a sudden the rocky area I'm sitting on erupts in a green light around me. Very startled, I turned around to look for the origin, expecting to see another hiker's green headlamp or something. But nobody. And I know for a fact I was the only one up there during the time I was shooting. Instead, I saw this thin green stake of light slowly falling from the sky about 20 feet in front of me. Not like a comet or an animal or the aurora or something. This was close to my plane where I was standing and almost suspended in the air. It looked like the remnant pieces of a firework ash floating back to the ground after exploding. But that would be impossible, as I heard no boom. Also, thought maybe it was a hiker's flare, but again, no sound. It lasted about 2 seconds and then disappeared. Needless to say, I packed up and hoofed it back down the trail double time with some music playing from my phone to ward off critters. When I got back to my campsite, I remembered the long exposure was running when this happened, so I checked to see if I just imagined this green light, or if maybe the camera captured it. The light appeared behind me, so I didn't get the actual stake that I saw,